AITA for refusing to drop the prenup when my wife's family tried to use me as their personal ATM. I was 23 when I met Vanessa. I had just graduated from college and was working my first job at a tech company in Denver. Vanessa was finishing her teaching degree, and we met at a barbecue hosted by a mutual friend. She had this gift for making everyone laugh and putting people at ease. Honestly, I was hooked from day one. Vanessa came from a well-off family. Her father owned several car dealerships, and her mother ran a boutique in Boulder. They weren't immensely wealthy, but they had the kind of money that makes life simpler. On the other hand, my family was firmly middle class. My dad was an electrician, my mom was a nurse, and they raised my two brothers and me in a small, cozy house. We never went hungry, but vacations or new clothes were rare. In any case, Vanessa and I clicked quickly. We started dating, and within a year, I knew she was the one. I proposed to her in a park where we loved to spend our quiet Sundays, and she said yes. Everything seemed perfect. Well, almost. Her parents, especially her father, weren't thrilled with me. From the beginning, they made it clear they didn't think I was good enough for Vanessa. It wasn't overt hostility, but rather subtle jabs meant to remind me of my place. Phrases like, "So, Nathan, what's your 5-year plan?" Or, Vanessa is used to a certain standard of living. I pretended not to notice because I loved Vanessa and she stood by me. When we started planning the wedding, her parents dropped the prenup bombshell. I remember that night perfectly. Vanessa's father called me into his home office after dinner. He had this serious look on his face, as if he was about to give me life-changing advice. Instead, he handed me a thick stack of documents and said, "This is just a formality, Nathan. It's to protect Vanessa's future. I'm sure you understand." I didn't understand, and I didn't like it either. I felt insulted. Why did they assume I was going to take advantage of their daughter? At the time, I was barely making $40,000 a year at my tech job. But I had plans, big plans. I wanted to prove myself, not just to them, but to Vanessa and to myself. Still, I didn't want to start a conflict. So, I took the papers home and read them, torn between anger and confusion. The contract clearly stated that if Vanessa and I ever divorced, I would walk away with absolutely nothing, except what I had earned myself. No money from her family, no inherited assets, nothing. Everything was designed to protect her, not us. I hated every single line of it. I talked to Vanessa about it, hoping she would support me. Instead, she said, "Nathan, it's not a big deal. It's just paperwork. It doesn't change how I feel about you." She was calm, but I could tell she felt caught between me and her family. I didn't want to put her in that position. So, I swallowed my pride and signed. I told myself it didn't matter since I wasn't marrying her for her family's money. In hindsight, that was probably my first mistake, letting her parents set the tone for our marriage. But at the time, I thought I was doing the right thing. I figured they would eventually accept me and that the prenup would never be an issue since we were building our life from scratch. The wedding itself was beautiful, but also a little awkward. My family and hers didn't really mix. My brothers and a few cousins showed up in borrowed or discount suits, while Vanessa's side looked like a page out of a country club catalog. There was no drama, but the divide was obvious. After the wedding, we moved into a small apartment in Denver. Vanessa started teaching at a local elementary school, and I kept grinding away at my tech job. The first few years were tough, but rewarding. We watched every penny, cooked almost all our meals at home, and saved every cent we could. Her parents sometimes made comments about our tight budget, but we didn't care. We were happy. Despite everything, the prenup was always in the back of my mind. It wasn't that I thought we'd ever need it, but it symbolized something deeper. It was a sign that her family didn't trust me, even after we were married and despite all our efforts to build a life together. Every sarcastic remark from her father about my job or our financial situation stung, and it made me work even harder. I wanted to prove them wrong, but the contract never really went away. It would sometimes come up in conversation, briefly but pointedly. Her mother would joke about how smart they were to have me sign it, or her father would mention it when discussing the protection of family assets. He'd smile when he said it, but to me, it always felt like a slap in the face. I never said anything. I just kept my head down and focused on my career. I loved Vanessa, and I didn't want her parents to destroy what we had. I told myself that as long as we were happy, nothing else mattered. But looking back now, I can see that the prenup was much more than just a legal document. It was a constant reminder that her family didn't think I was good enough. And when our life started to change, that piece of paper became the center of a storm I never saw coming. After a few years of slogging away at my tech job, things started to shift, but not overnight. It was more of a slow build of small wins that eventually snowballed into something much bigger. I was 27 when I got my first real break, but the path wasn't as straightforward as I'd hoped. At that time, I was still at the same tech company in Denver. The pay was decent, but nothing special. I'd been there for about 4 years and felt like I'd hit a ceiling. My position was stable but uninspiring, with almost no room for growth. I knew if I wanted to really get ahead, I'd have to take a risk. One of my colleagues, Owen, told me about a little side hustle he'd started, freelance development for startups. At first, I was skeptical and thought he'd burn himself out juggling 2 jobs. Then he showed me what he'd made in 1 month of freelance work, and I was floored. He was making double what we earned at our full-time jobs. That got me thinking. I'd always been good at web development and problem solving. I started spending my weekends honing my skills, learning new languages and frameworks, and working on personal projects. Vanessa thought I was crazy. "You already work full-time. Why are you putting yourself through this?" she'd ask. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was an opportunity one had to seize. After about 6 months of freelancing on the side, I landed a client that was a complete game changer. It was a small tech startup looking for someone to build their entire backend system. The pay was higher than anything I'd ever earned on a single project, and they also offered stock options. Initially, I had no idea if those shares would ever be worth anything, but the company's vision really resonated with me. So, I took the leap. For the next year, I worked like a madman. I kept my day job with its 40-hour weeks, but every spare minute was dedicated to this project. Evenings, weekends, all of it. Vanessa wasn't thrilled. She was supportive, but I could tell she was frustrated that she wasn't seeing me as much anymore. We had arguments, mostly small ones, about missed dinners or me being glued to my computer when we were supposed to be watching a movie. I'd always say, "Just a little longer, I promise," but I don't think either of us really believed it. Then it happened. The startup I was working with was acquired by a larger company, and my stock options exploded in value. One day, we were struggling to keep up with our mortgage and car payments. The next, I had enough money to pay everything off and still have a comfortable nest egg. I'll never forget the look on Vanessa's face when I told her the news. She was shocked, in a good way, but I think a part of her had trouble believing it was real. That moment changed everything. I quit my tech job the following week, a dream I'd been nursing for years. My boss didn't take it well. He tried to guilt-trip me into staying, saying things like, "You're one of our best guys, Nathan. Are you sure you want to throw it all away like this?" But I knew I was done. I had much bigger plans now. The first thing I did after quitting was take Vanessa on a surprise trip to Hawaii. We'd been talking about going for years, but could never afford it. It was my way of showing her that all the hard work had paid off and that I hadn't forgotten about us. It was incredible. The beaches, the sunsets, the food. But even there, I couldn't stop thinking about what was next. I realized I loved working for myself. The freedom, the challenge, the sense of control, it was exhilarating. That's when I decided to start my own company. I used the money from the startup acquisition to launch a property management firm. Real estate had always interested me, and I saw it as a stable way to grow my assets without being stuck behind a desk. Starting the business wasn't easy. There were a million things I didn't know, from legal paperwork to managing employees. But I threw myself into it with the same intensity one had with my freelance work. I read books, attended seminars, and leaned on a mentor I had met during my freelance years. Slowly but surely, things started falling into place. By the time I was 30, my life had taken a turn I never could have imagined just a few years earlier. The property management company I had started was doing very well, much better than I had hoped. We were getting more and more clients, and I had managed to build a reliable team that handled most of the day-to-day operations. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I was comfortable. I was proud of how far I'd come and thought I had finally earned a bit of respect from Vanessa's family. But that's not exactly what I got. It all started subtly. Vanessa's father, Richard, started calling me for investment advice. At first, it seemed innocent. "Hey Nathan," he'd say, "I'm looking at a commercial property downtown. What do you think?" Initially, I was happy to help. I figured he finally saw me as someone who had proven himself, and I appreciated him finally acknowledging my expertise. But soon, the questions became more personal. Do you think you could invest with me just to help get the project off the ground? He asked during one conversation. I hesitated. On one hand, he was family, and I wanted to be supportive. On the other, the deal he was describing seemed shaky to me. I politely told him I wasn't in a position to invest at the moment. That's when I first noticed a shift in Richard's attitude toward me. He didn't say anything outright, but there was a definite coldness the next time we saw each other. Vanessa noticed it too and asked if something had happened. I downplayed it, saying, "No, he's probably just stressed from work." But deep down, I knew he hadn't appreciated my refusal. Meanwhile, Vanessa's mother, Evelyn, had her own way of making things awkward. She would drop seemingly innocent comments about the cost of living, explaining how it was getting harder to maintain their lifestyle now that Richard was semi-retired. "We're not as young as we used to be, Nathan," she'd say with a smile. "Sometimes I think about how lucky you and Vanessa are to have such a solid financial foundation." Lucky. That word bothered me. It wasn't luck that got me where I was, but years of sleepless nights, sacrifice, and hard work. But I kept quiet to avoid tension. Things took a more serious turn one weekend when Vanessa and I went to her parents' house for dinner. The meal started off well, with steak and small talk. But as the evening went on, Richard brought up the prenup. "You know, Nathan," he said, cutting his steak, "I've been thinking about that agreement we had you sign when you and Vanessa got married." I froze. I hadn't thought about the prenup in years. To me, it was just a formality to appease them, something irrelevant now. I thought all of that was behind us. "What about it?" I asked cautiously. "Don't you think it's a bit outdated now? Look at how successful you are today. You've built a wonderful life for my daughter, and I respect that. But keeping that document doesn't really make sense anymore, does it?" I glanced at Vanessa, who suddenly seemed extremely focused on her mashed potatoes. It was obvious she knew this conversation was coming. "I don't know, Richard," I replied, trying to stay neutral. "It's never been an issue for us. Why change something that works?" Evelyn chimed in. "It's just that things have changed, Nathan. When you got married, we wanted to protect Vanessa's future. But now that you're so successful, the contract doesn't really make sense. You're part of the family, after all." There was that word again, family. A way to make me seem unreasonable if I refused. I looked at Vanessa again, hoping she would defend me, but she remained silent. Her silence annoyed me more than anything. "Honestly, I don't see any reason to nullify it," I finally said. "It has no impact on our daily lives. It's just a piece of paper in a drawer." Richard's smile tightened, and Evelyn shot Vanessa a look that seemed to say, "Can't you talk some sense into him?" But no one pushed it further that night. On the drive home, I brought it up with Vanessa. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. She sighed, looking out the window. "Because I don't want to be caught in the middle, Nathan. You know how my parents are. They just want what's best for me. What about what's best for us?" I retorted. "This is our marriage, not theirs. The contract was never a problem. So why are they pushing this now?" She didn't really have an answer. She just said, "I'll talk to them. Don't worry about it." But I was worried. A lot. In the following weeks, the pressure only mounted. Richard and Evelyn always found a way to bring up the contract, framing it as a casual discussion. Vanessa became more defensive, saying things like, "You have nothing to lose by voiding it." That's when I started to feel like I was fighting a battle on two fronts, against her parents and against Vanessa herself. I loved her, but it was hard not to feel like she wasn't completely on my side. The breaking point came when Evelyn called me one afternoon while I was at the office. She started with small talk, then quickly steered the conversation back to the prenup. "Nathan, you should really think about the message this sends," she said. "Keeping that document makes it seem like you don't trust Vanessa, and that's not fair to her." I'd had enough. "With all due respect, Evelyn, this isn't your decision to make. Vanessa and I are fine just the way we are." There was a pause, then she said something I'll never forget. "Well, if you're so set on keeping it, I guess we'll just have to see how Vanessa feels about that in the long run." It wasn't a direct threat, but it felt dangerously close to one. I hung up, furious. That night, I told Vanessa what her mother had said. She didn't seem surprised. Instead, she replied, "They're just worried about me, Nathan. They don't mean any harm." It was then that I understood. This wasn't just about a prenup. It was about control. Her parents had always had a say in her life, and now they were trying to extend that control to me. Update 1. Hey everyone, Nathan again. First off, thank you for all the advice and support I've received so far. Honestly, it's been a real eye-opener. Writing everything down has helped me see things more clearly, and reading stories from people who've gone through similar situations has helped immensely. So, here's where we stand. Things have not gotten better. If anything, the pressure has intensified. Vanessa brings up the prenup more and more often, and I can't ignore the change in her tone. It's no longer just, this is something we should discuss. Now, it's more like, if you trusted me, you'd agree to get rid of it. We've had several arguments about it. The last one was particularly nasty when I told her bluntly, this isn't about trust, Vanessa. This is about your parents trying to control us. She didn't like that and shot back. Or maybe it's you who doesn't trust me. What kind of husband keeps something like this in place after all these years? That stung. I told her the prenup was never an issue for years, so why is it suddenly a problem now? The only thing that's changed, I said, is that your parents see dollar signs. She called me paranoid, which has become her go-to argument. At that point, I realized we needed to have a real conversation without distractions. So, I suggested we spend a few days at the cabin we loved so much. It's a small, quiet place by a river, and I thought maybe it would let us reset and talk calmly, without her parents hovering over us like a storm cloud. Vanessa agreed, but her attitude made it clear she wasn't thrilled. Once we got there, things started off okay. The cabin was just as I remembered, peaceful, secluded, perfect for clearing your head. The first night, we cooked dinner together, which felt almost normal for a change, but even then, there was a silent tension in the air. The next morning, I decided to stop beating around the bush. We were sitting on the dock, watching the river, and I said, Vanessa, I need to know what's really going on. Is this about us, or is this about your parents? She sighed, not even trying to hide her annoyance. Nathan, this is about us. My parents don't control what I think. I'm the one saying this contract doesn't make sense anymore. I didn't believe her for a second. Come on, Vanessa. Let's not pretend your parents haven't been pushing this from the start. They're the ones who made me sign it, and now they're the ones who want to get rid of it. That's not a coincidence. She turned to me, her face serious. Do you hear yourself? You're acting like my parents are the villains when they just want what's best for me. What's best for you, or what's best for them? This isn't their marriage, Vanessa. It's ours, and I'm not going to let them make our decisions for us. That's when she said something that made my blood boil. Maybe the problem isn't them, Nathan. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're so wrapped up in your own insecurities that you can't see how unfair this is to me. Insecure. I shot back. You think I'm insecure because I don't want to tear up an agreement your parents forced on me? The same agreement they made me sign because they didn't trust me. She shrugged and replied, well, if you can't trust me now, maybe we shouldn't even be talking about a future together. It hit me like a ton of bricks, but I didn't let it show. Wow. So now you're threatening to leave because I refuse to give in to your parents' demands? Real mature, Vanessa. It's not a threat, Nathan, she said in a cold voice. It's reality. If you're this obsessed with this contract, maybe you don't see me as your partner anymore. Maybe you're just waiting for me to make a mistake so you can walk away with everything. That was it. I stood up, looked her straight in the eye, and said, don't you dare turn this around on me. I worked my tail off for everything we have, with zero help from your parents. If anyone's loyalty should be in question here, it's mine to question yours. She just stared at me without saying a word, and I went back to the cabin to cool off. The rest of the trip was a disaster. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was tense. By the time we packed up to go home, it was clear we were no longer on the same page at all. I have my first therapy session this week, and I'm hoping it will help me figure out my next steps. Right now, I feel like I'm in the middle of a minefield, trying not to set anything off. I love Vanessa, but this situation is making me question a lot of things. If any of you have been through something similar, I'd really like to know how you handled it. Thanks for reading and for your support. Update 2. Hey everyone. I wish I was coming back with better news, but things have gotten worse. I'm at a point where I don't even know if my marriage can survive this. Everything blew up last Wednesday when I came home to find Vanessa's entire family sitting in my living room. Her parents, her sister Claire, and Vanessa herself. They were waiting for me, like it was some kind of intervention. The moment I walked in, Richard started. "Nathan, we've talked it over, and it's time to settle this prenup business. It's tearing the family apart, and we can't go on like this." I couldn't believe it. Last I checked, this was my marriage, not a group project. I looked at Vanessa, hoping she would step in and de-escalate, but she just stood there, staring at the floor. "Look," I said, trying to keep my cool. "I've already made my position clear. The contract stays. It's not up for negotiation." That's when Evelyn jumped in. "Nathan, you're being unreasonable. Vanessa has given everything to this marriage, and you're treating her like she's disposable." Disposable? I had spent years building a life for us while dealing with their constant interference. "With all due respect, Evelyn, this is not your business. Vanessa and I need to handle this alone." She didn't back down. "It becomes our business when it affects the family. If you truly cared about Vanessa, you'd see that keeping this contract is hurting her." Before I could respond, Richard said something that sent a chill down my spine. "You're not the only one with options, Nathan. Vanessa deserves to be protected. And if you can't understand that, maybe your marriage isn't as solid as you think." It sounded like a thinly veiled threat, and I wasn't going to let it slide. "Are you seriously implying my marriage depends on me tearing up a legal document your family forced on me? You've got a hell of a nerve, Richard." The room went silent. I noticed Claire, Vanessa's younger sister, shifting nervously. She always seemed a bit different from the rest of the family, quieter, less involved in the drama. At the moment, I didn't think much of it, but in hindsight, I should have known something was up. Finally, I asked everyone to leave. I wasn't going to be ganged up on in my own house. Vanessa stayed, and we had one of the worst fights of our lives. She accused me of being stubborn and selfish, and I told her I was tired of being treated like a walking wallet by her parents. The fight got so heated that she stormed out, slamming the door and saying she was going to stay with her parents for a few days. I didn't stop her. The next day, I got a call from Claire. I was surprised since we almost never spoke outside of family gatherings. She sounded nervous and asked if we could meet in person. I agreed, thinking maybe she wanted to apologize for the intervention or offer some kind of explanation. When we met at a coffee shop, Claire looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept. She kept looking around as if she was afraid someone would see us. Finally, she said, "Nathan, I overheard something the other day, and I think you need to know." What she told me completely blew my mind. Apparently, Vanessa and her parents had been planning something behind my back for months. Claire had overheard them talking during a family dinner when they thought she wasn't around. "They said the prenup had to be voided before Vanessa could leave you," she told me, her voice trembling. "They said it was the only way for her to get what she deserves." I couldn't process it. Leave me? Why would she want to leave me? Claire hesitated, then dropped the real bombshell. "Because she's seeing someone else. Her parents know, Nathan. That's why they're pushing so hard to get rid of the contract. They think that if she divorces you with it in place, she'll get nothing." It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I asked if she was sure, and she nodded. I didn't want to believe it either, but I heard everything. They even talked about how to spin the situation to make you look like the bad guy. I just sat there in shock, trying to wrap my head around what she had just told me. Claire seemed genuinely upset, and I could tell she wasn't lying. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. She sighed. "Because it's not right, Nathan. You don't deserve this. I've always thought you were a good guy, and I hate the way my family treats you. I don't want to be a part of it." I thanked her for telling me and promised to keep her out of it. After she left, I sat there for what felt like hours, replaying everything in my head. The late nights at work, the arguments about the prenup, Vanessa's sudden change in attitude. It all finally made sense. When I got home, I started looking through our joint finances for anything unusual. And sure enough, I found expenses I didn't recognize: restaurants, hotels, even a few jewelry stores. I haven't confronted Vanessa yet, but I've started gathering evidence. I called my lawyer and told him everything. He advised me to stay calm and not make any rash decisions. Easier said than done. For now, I'm just trying to figure out my next move. This feels like a betrayal on a level I never could have imagined. I don't know what's going to happen next, but one thing is for sure. That prenup isn't going anywhere, and neither is my self-respect. If anyone has advice on how to handle this kind of situation, I'm all ears. Thanks for following along. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's Nathan, back for what I hope will be the last time. This whole thing has been an absolute mess, but I've finally made it to the other side. And let me tell you, it feels good to have my life back. After learning the whole truth from Claire, who, by the way, is the real hero of this story, I moved quickly and decisively. My lawyer and I worked like a well-oiled machine. The evidence I had, the inappropriate relationship, the questionable expenses, and even her parents' involvement, made the divorce proceedings almost laughably straightforward. When I finally confronted Vanessa, she didn't even try to deny it. She cried, played the victim, and made every excuse in the book. "I was so lonely while you were working all the time," she sobbed. "You put your job before me. I didn't let that fly. You don't get to blame me for your choices. I worked myself to the bone to give us a life most people only dream of. And you threw it all away." At first, she tried to argue. "Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." It hurt, but I didn't show it. "You didn't have to do anything. You made a choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." The look on her face when I told her I'd already filed for divorce was priceless. She feigned shock, as if she couldn't believe I would actually go through with it. Then she switched tactics, begging me to reconsider. "We can fix this, Nathan. We can go to therapy, start over, whatever you want." I told her plainly there was nothing left to fix. The trust was shattered, and her actions spoke far louder than any apology. Now, let's talk about the prenup. Oh, that magnificent document. That lifesaver. Thanks to that ironclad agreement her family forced on me, Vanessa walked away with nothing. Not a single cent of the money I had earned through my own sweat and hard work. No alimony, no division of assets, nothing. Add her broken trust to the mix, and legally, she didn't have a leg to stand on. Her parents, of course, were furious. Evelyn called me several times, leaving long, rambling voicemails about how I was ruining Vanessa's life and how I needed to be the bigger person. The sheer audacity. I didn't even respond. My lawyer advised me to document everything in case they tried something, but thankfully, they backed off quickly once they realized they had no leverage. Shortly after, I found out the real reason they were so desperate to void the contract. As it turned out, Richard and Evelyn's financial situation was nowhere near as rosy as they pretended. Their businesses had been losing money for years, and they were barely keeping their heads above water. Their lavish lifestyle was all a facade. When Vanessa moved back in with them, the cracks in their perfect image became obvious. She went from our beautiful house to her old childhood bedroom. No more designer clothes, spa days, or expensive dinners. From what I hear, they're all struggling to keep up appearances, but it's only a matter of time before the house of cards collapses. And let's not forget the other guy, the one she thought she was going to ride off into the sunset with. Yeah, he straight up ghosted her as soon as things started to go south. Claire told me he was a serial player with no intention of settling down. He was just having fun with Vanessa, and the second he realized she no longer had access to my money, he vanished. As a result, Vanessa found herself jobless, broke, and stuck living with her parents, who could no longer even support her the way they used to. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course, Vanessa couldn't let it go. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, she showed up at my office unannounced. My assistant tried to stop her, but Vanessa just pushed past her. She looked exhausted. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were wrinkled and worn, and she had this desperate look in her eyes. "Nathan," she said, crying, "I made a mistake. Please, forgive me." I leaned back in my chair and just watched her for a moment. Part of me wanted to laugh at the audacity, but mostly I just felt empty. "Vanessa, we've been over this. You didn't make a mistake. You made a series of choices that destroyed our marriage. Forgiveness isn't going to change that." She tried everything: apologies, blaming her parents, promises to change, and even hinting at a possible reconciliation. "We can start over, Nathan. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." But it was a non-starter. "You didn't just break my trust. You planned on leaving me while trying to take what I worked for. That's not love, and it's certainly not something I can forgive." When she realized I wasn't going to budge, she got angry. "You're going to regret this, Nathan. You'll end up alone, and you'll realize you pushed away the only person who ever truly cared about you." I just shook my head. "Vanessa, you didn't care about me. You cared about the life I gave you. Now you have to figure it out on your own." I had security escort her out. That was the last time I saw her. Since then, life has been much calmer. Claire and I are still in touch. She apologized again for her family's behavior, but honestly, she didn't have to. She was the only one with the courage to do the right thing, and I'll always be grateful to her for that. As for Vanessa and her parents, from what I hear, their financial situation continues to decline. I feel a little bad for Claire, being stuck in the middle of all that. But as for the others, they made their bed. Now they have to lie in it. If there's one lesson I've learned from this whole ordeal, it's the importance of standing your ground. Some people will try to take advantage of you, manipulate you, or guilt trip you to serve their own interests. But in the end, you have to look out for yourself. To anyone out there dealing with a difficult situation with in-laws, a questionable partner, or a scenario that just doesn't feel right, trust your gut and stand up for what's right. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Thank you again to everyone who followed my story and offered advice. Your support meant more than you can imagine. Onward and upward, without ever looking back. Comment. I want to start by saying how proud I am of anyone who has the courage to stand up for themselves. It's never easy to draw a line in the sand, especially when the people crossing it are supposed to be your family or your partner. Your value isn't defined by how much you can give to others or how useful you are to them. Sometimes, that quiet voice inside you warning that something is wrong is actually your best friend. Listening to that instinct takes bravery, but it's often the first step toward protecting your peace. Walking away from toxic situations doesn't mean you failed. It means you chose to respect your future. You don't need revenge or anger, because life has a way of balancing things out on its own. Focus on building a life where you're celebrated for who you are, not just for what you have. Keep your head up, trust your journey, and never apologize for prioritizing your well-being. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.